Hello guys, if you are building an application, a website, a software, whatever it is, you oftentimes have to test to make sure that the things you are building are working as expected. About every feature, functionality in the project you are working on, we need testing. If it's the website, the user login, the registration, sending email, adding items to shopping cart, there are just a whole lot of things that you will need to test. You might just consider doing this manually, testing all these functionalities manually, but that can come with a lot of disadvantages which test-driven development can help you solve. Now this lesson is about test-driven development, and we are going to do that using PHPUnit and Laravel framework. In case you don't know what the test is all about, that is test-driven development, it basically helps you automate the testing process, and it comes with a couple of advantages. For example, test-driven development helps you detect bugs and fix them, right? Also, it also helps you refactor your codes with more confidence that you can catch any bug that arises from that process. Let's assume that you've been building this application, there are so many features and functionalities, but there are little changes you want to make here and there, and these kind of things happens all the time. When you make that change, how do you make sure that everything is still working fine as expected? Remember that this part of your code can depend on the other part of your code, so many things depending on each other. And when something is broken at one end, or when something has been changed at one end, it can actually affect the other parts of your code. Now, what you might want to do is to start testing all those features manually again, but that can take a whole lot of time. But if you have written automated tests for each of those functionalities, each of those features of the application, you should be able to just run one command and the automated test will do all those testing for you, okay? That means you can refactor any part of your code and rely on the automated test you have written to help you easily detect any bug that arises. Also, due to the way that tests are written, it can also serve as a kind of documentation for the code. So anyone reading your code, assuming a different developer that goes through the test cases you have written, will be able to understand easily the functionality, the features, and what is going on in the code. There are other benefits of doing test-driven development. You can just check them out. But for now, let's see how we can do this with PHP and Laravel. Before we proceed further, I want to say that this lesson focuses on using PHPUnit in Laravel, how you can use PHPUnit to write automated tests for your Laravel application. So, this lesson assumes that you know the basics of Laravel as well as PHPUnit, right? So you need those very basics to follow along. So what are we testing? We are going to build and test APIs for job posting. In the database, we are going to have users table, jobs, and job categories tables. A job will belong to a user through the user ID, and a job will belong to a category through the job category ID. Now, let's make a new Laravel project. There are different ways to create a Laravel project, but you can use Compose as well. You copy this command on the screen. You go to your command line or terminal, you paste, you change the project name to whatever you want. I called mine Learn Laravel. You hit enter. I'm not going to hit enter because I've already created this project. So When you hit enter, it is going to download a bunch of files and the project will be created. And then you cd into the project folder, you go into it. Now inside the project folder, just to be sure that everything is fine, run php artisan serve. Artisan serve. So the project is running. You can visit this on your browser to confirm. I will go ahead and stop the server because I don't need it running. Ctrl C, stop the server. Now open the project in the code editor of your choice. And first, go to phpunit.xml. Let us do a little bit of configuration. What I want to do is to take PHPUnit to use in-memory database. You do that by uncommenting these two lines, this line and this line. Okay. Now let's talk about testing in Laravel. In the root of the project, there is a folder called test. When you open that, there are two other folders, unit and feature. Unit is where your unit test goes into. The unit test tests a single functionality. For example, if you have a method that does search and replace on a string, it takes in a string, does some search there, replaces it with another string, and returns the new string. That's an ideal candidate for unit test. Feature test, on the other hand, tests the behavior when two or more things act together. For example, if you make a request to your application, there is this request response cycle and other things that could come between. You have the controllers, you have the model, you have the database, you could also have some middleware. This is an ideal situation where you can write feature test. And we already have an example here that came with the application when it was created. How do you run the test? To do that, we have a couple of options. I will show you the quickest one using artisan. PHP artisan test. PHP artisan test is one option. So currently it's running the test for the two examples we have already. Another is to go into the PHPUnit file in the vendor/bin/php unit. So that is another option of doing this, but most times I prefer to use PHP artisan test because it's easier to type. So that's how you run the test. To start writing some codes, let's open up the diagram again. In the diagram, we can see that we have users. By default, Laravel has users table, and we are going to leave that the way it is. So if I go to the app models, there is user already, and I am fine with the way it is. Next is there is jobs. So let's get started with job categories, since job depends on both user and job categories. What I want to do here is to make a test. It's to create a test case for job categories, and the way you do that is by PHP artisan make test. I'll call the job category test. So this is going to create a feature test. If you want to make a unit test instead, you add the flag unit. But what we are doing here is feature test. So I'll go ahead and hit enter, and that will create a new file in the test folder under feature test. So this is our feature test. Let's get started with the test cases. The first thing I want to test is ability to create a job category. Then I should be able to fetch the categories. Okay, let's get started with those two for now. So I'll make a test method test. This is how I prefer to name the method. You can name it anyhow you prefer. The important thing is to remember that the method name starts with test, right? Alternatively, I will actually remove this. Alternatively is to use the annotation test here, and then you can remove this, whichever one you prefer. So this is going to test create category, and I'm expecting a success for this, and the result is that a category is created. So I'll go ahead and say this post job categories. I'll call this response, and then I will make some assertion. Assert status 201. So what is going on here? I am calling the endpoint to create job categories, and I expect status code of 201. That means the resource was created, right? I'll go ahead and run the test. PHP artisan test. Okay, we have a failure. It's saying 404 instead of 201. We're expecting a 201, but it's a 404. That is good because we don't even have this endpoint defined. And remember that the approach to test-driven development is to write the test, see it fail, and then you refactor your code to make the test pass. So the idea of writing this test first or making this assumption first is intentional. It was intentional. Now we go ahead and define the endpoint. I will remove this thing here. Let me actually create the job category model, migration file, and controller first. Head over to the terminal, PHP artisan, make model. With the -m, we are going to create the job category model and the migration file. After that, we create the job category controller. So now we should have, if we go to the models, we have job category model. We go to the database migrations, we have job categories, and if we open the controller, we should have job category controller. Now we go back to the api.php route file and define the endpoint. Post job category controller. class store. So we are saying that when we call this endpoint, we should call the store method in job category controller. We go back to the terminal and run the test again. This time we get different error. It says we are expecting a 201, but we got a 404. That is strange because we already have the endpoint. Now let me check the test one more time. Post job categories. I believe that's what we have here. Post job categories. We shouldn't get a 404. Something is missing here. Okay, remember that the way Laravel API endpoints work is that by default it has this API prefix in the route. So we should be calling API/job categories, not just job categories. Run the test again. This time we get 500 as a response. Sometimes you might want to call this without exception handling. It helps to give more details of what the error is saying. So I run this again. So it says that the store method does not exist. Now the error is clear. Of course, we don't have a store method, so we go to the controller and we define that method. Public store request. Okay, the method now exists. We run this test one more. Now it says we're expecting a 201 but got a 200. Correct, because this method does not even return anything. If I go ahead and return a 201 here, response JSON, no data, 201, and I run the test again. So this time the test passes because we are returning a 201. But obviously that's not just what we want to do. We have not actually created the job, and what I want to do here is to make more assertions. This time I want to say assert JSON. So I'm expecting not just the status code but other information. Status true, message, job category, and I want some data. This is going to be the job category that was created. For now, I'll just leave the data empty and run this test again. Artisan test. This time it says we are expecting this JSON, but we got this JSON. Of course, because in the controller we are not even returning any data and there's no data to return, right? Let's go ahead and return something. First is request validate. I will validate the incoming data. We are expecting for a job category a title that is required, and it will be a string. Also unique. unique job categories title, and then we have user ID. According to the diagram, and with that data, we create a new job category. Data. This time we return some response, some data in the response. Status is true. Message. Created. And data to be the job category we just created. Okay, so we create a job category, we return this response, and based on our test, we're expecting certain response structure. We run this test one more time. So this time it says that the given data is invalid. Of course, because we're making this request without any request body, nothing there, right? But to get a clearer message of what is missing, because here we have the validation, we don't even know what is missing, it just says that the given data is invalid. We are going to configure the project to return a JSON response for such scenarios where validation fails. We go over to the exception handler. In this handler class, inside the exceptions folder, I want to return a response, a JSON response, when validation fails. The same thing also applies to 404. When there is a 404, I want to return a customized JSON response. To save us some time, I will paste some predefined code for this inside the register method that is in the handler class. We are going to add this. This is going to be for validation exception. Make sure to import that at the top. So whenever there is a validation failure, we are going to return this response if the request expects a JSON. The same thing applies to authorization, authentication, which we are going to get into later. When authentication fails, we are going to return this response. And also for 404s, when there is a 404, we return this response. So add this inside the register method, add this inside the register method, add this inside the register method. With that, we go back to the test. This time we expect to get a message that is clearer than what we got previously, that just said the given data was invalid. Run the test again. We still get the given data was invalid. Remember that in the handler, we say that we return this response when JSON response is expected, when the request expects JSON, right? So to get that JSON response, this method post, the next parameters there is data, that is the request body, and header. So for now, I will leave the data empty. Actually, let me go up here and I'll have payload to be this, and I'll have headers to be this. So for the headers, I want to say accept application/JSON. This will now tell the handler that we are expecting a JSON for this. request payload headers. We run the test one more time. We still get the given data was invalid. Something is missing. Accept. Okay, I think this could be the problem. Sometimes when it is there, the error message is not clear. Sometimes when it's not there, the error message is clear. I don't really know why. Just comment that out for now, and we run the test again. Clear, run. Alright, so that is better. This time we get the response from the handler that says that we're expecting this, but we got this. This is saying that the title is required, user ID is required. That is the kind of response that you want. Let's take a look at the controller again, this validation. Here it says user ID, but we can actually get the user ID from the authenticated user, right? Instead of expecting the user to supply the ID, which they can supply any ID anyway, we can just get that from the authenticated user. So I will change this to new job category, and I don't need that actually. Job category title to be request title, and job category user ID, job category user underscore ID to be the ID of the authenticated user, right? And finally, job category save here. But we have not done anything about authentication, and that brings us to the next thing we need to do here, and that is API authentication. For the API authentication, we are going to use Laravel Sanctum. You can read up the documentation, how it works, but I'll quickly go straight to the installation and the API authentication. This is how you install. You copy that composer require Laravel Sanctum, clear this, clear, paste. After that, I will copy this next line, vendor publish, copy the entire thing and paste here. Okay, with that done, it says I should run artisan migrate. Artisan migrate. Something is missing. Actually, I don't need that. I don't need to run this because I'm using the in-memory database, right? So, but if you're using the physical database, you can go ahead and run that. I don't need that. And okay, the next thing will be the API auth. I will have to copy this trait, add it to the user model, HTTP model user has API tokens. Make sure to import that from from Sanctum. And with that done, what is the next thing here? To issue a token. Okay, we are ready to issue some token, right? I think we are all set here. If you jump down to the test, there has to be test somewhere here. This is how we can use Sanctum in our test. That is to pretend that the user has been authenticated using Laravel Sanctum. Now that we have Laravel Sanctum set up and the API authentication as well, we can go ahead and make use of it as described in the documentation. So we say Sanctum acting as. We also make use of the user factory. By default, there's a user factory that comes with a new Laravel project. So here we say user factory create. That gives us an authenticated user. Then for the payload, we need the title. I want to make use of this variable in the assertion letter, so let me take it outside here. Title engineering. Okay, I think at this point we can go ahead and run the test again. We say artisan test. Okay, we get an error. It says that we don't have a table. We don't have users table. Let's make use of the refresh database trait here. Refresh database. Make sure to import that. Come on. This resets the database after each test. I will run the test one more time. So scroll up. This time we get that job categories has no column title. Of course, if we go to the database migration for job categories, database migration, job categories, we don't have such column. Let's go ahead and add it. Table string title. I will also add the user ID. Table. There is this Laravel 8 syntax for this. Foreign ID constrained. So this is the same thing as saying that come on, user underscore ID. The user ID is a foreign key that references ID in the user's table, right? Okay, so we have those two items there. I will clear and run the test one more time. So this time everything passed. Good. Let's go back to the test method. In the test method, I want to modify the assertion. I want to have status to be true and then message say job category created, and to have data that will be an array because it's an object from the controller. I want ID to be 1. It is the only record we have in the database so far. And then the title to be the same title when we created the job category. Okay, so we run the test one more time with that. Artisan test, and we get something else. It says we're expecting this, but we got this. What is the difference here? Oh, this is crazy. I already have the data key here. I'm actually repeating the entire thing again. So I will cut this, put it here. Alright, run the test one more time. Test. Okay, our test passed. What I want to do here is to modify this assertion. Remember that the data is returning the category we just created, so I can say ID to be 1 because that is the only record we have created so far, and title to be the same thing as the title when we created the category. And I run the test again, and the test passes. Let me intentionally modify this. So I'll run the test again. It says we're expecting this, but we got this. So I'll correct that. Run the test one more time, and the test passes. There is one thing I want to quickly point out here. Sometimes the order of this assertion can be helpful or not helpful. You can see that I'm asserting a JSON here before asserting the status code. If, for example, I rearrange this, okay, and I remove this required title is required, I am making this assertion before this assertion, and I run the test. So the message I got, it says I'm expecting a 201 but got 422. At this point, this is not super helpful compared to telling me exactly the reason I'm getting the 422. That is because at this point the test has failed. So if I rearrange this back to the way it was, this assertion first, and I removed the title again, it is required. This assertion, then this one, and I run this test again. So the same test method, but the difference is clear. This time it is telling us that the title is required. I'll go ahead and uncomment this. So in situations like this, where you might be more interested in the reason for the failure, for the validation failure, you can rearrange your assertion. Alright. Down here, I want to make one more assertion. You can create a different test method for that, but I want to quickly add it down here. What I want to do is to create 10 more records of job categories and assert that there are now 11 records in the database. So job category, factory, I need 10 records, create, and we make the assertion this, assert database count. The table name is job categories. This assertion actually, I think it comes from Laravel, not PHPUnit. So we assert that there are now 11 records in the database. We go ahead now and run the test again. Artisan test. Okay, it says we don't have a factory, job category factory, of course. So we go ahead and create that with the command php artisan make factory job category factory. We open the factory we just created, database factory job category factory, and here we need the title. This faker is going to be, let's use worth to as text, and then user ID we use the factory factory. Okay, we run the test again, test, and this time our test passed. So far we have only one test method. That took some time because we needed to do a couple of setup here and there. Let's move on to the next test method. This is going to test the validation. So let's just write that public function test. What are we testing? Check the required fields. And we expect failure when it is not supplied. Returned. So we are testing that when the required fields are not supplied, there will be a failure and we get the validation errors. To save us some time, I will copy this from here to here, just that, paste that over here, and what I want to do is to make a request without the title or without the required fields. So you can have more than one field here. It could be up to 10 required fields. I will make this assertion, I will make this test method with that kind of assumption that there are more than one fields that could be required. Now what I want to do is to loop through the payload, and for each of the fields in the payload, I will make a request to the endpoint to create a job category without that field, so the field will be excluded. First, let me get the keys of this array. So we can do that by saying array keys, array keys, and the array is payload. This will give us only the keys. Now for each key in the keys, array keys as a key, what I will do is to make, first let me create a new payload here, is equal to array merge payload. So what I will do here is to override, to change this key to set it to null. So whatever key it is currently, the value will be null. Then we go ahead and call the same endpoint with the modified payload. So I will call the endpoint at this point, but with the new payload. And we also modify this response, this assertion here, based on what we have defined in our custom error handler. In the handler class, we say when there is a validation error, we want to get this JSON response. So going back here, this is going to be false, and the message will be validation failed, and data will be null. In addition, we have this error key. Where is it? Handler. We have these error keys that returns the validation errors that come from here. So I'll add one more key here, and that will be error, which will be array, and based on the way that the validation error is structured, this will give us the title. The only field we have now is the title. I will modify this later. The title field is required, so that will be the error message. So what we have here is we loop through the payload. For each field in the payload, we set the value to null, and we make this assumption. Currently we have only the title. Like I said, I will modify this later. So we run the test one more time. Artisan test. So what do we have here? They look the same. Let me check the differences. The difference, okay, there's no period here. Run the test one more time. Okay, the test passes, right? What we have here now is just the title. That is why our hard-coded error message passes. Assuming we have more fields, typically you might have more than one field. So let's say some key, we set it to some value. In the controller, we add the some key field as well. Controller, come up here, and this required string. Okay, so now we run the test again. What will happen is that for title, this will pass, but for the other field, some key, of course, this hard-coded error message will not pass. We run this test again. What do we have here? It says unable to find JSON, validation failed within some key field is required. Okay. So we modify this. Instead of hard coding the title here, we say the key, and instead of this as well, we say the key. So for title, it's going to be the title field is required. For some key, it's going to be the some key is required. I'll clear this up, run the test again. So okay, because some key has underscore, this will be string replace. For the underscore in the key, we replace that with space. We put the key there. That will conform with the structure for the validation message. We run this one more time, and we are getting job created. Okay, so this is for the first test method for creating a job category. Remember, here we added this extra key and also in the controller. So what we can do here is to run only this test method, because we are going to remove this later. We just want to use it to show the scenario where I have multiple fields. So to run only a specific test, you can say PHP artisan test filter, and the next thing is the test method you want to run. So in this case, we just want to run the test method for checking the required fields, and then it passes, right? So this is how you can check for the required fields in the validation. Okay, so I will just go ahead and remove this, go to the controller and remove this, and I will run all the tests again now. This will run all the tests, and all the tests pass. I can also add the status here. Asset status 422. That is the status code for the validation failure. Let's add one more test method here. This method will be for fetching the job categories. So we say public test get job. Okay, the first thing I want to do is to create some job categories. So I can say job category factory. We create 3 records in the database, and we call the endpoint to get job categories. As a response, this get request, and the endpoint will be API/job categories. And sure, we accept, we pass the header accept application/JSON. So with that call to the endpoint, we can make some assertions. Actually, let me break this down. I want to use that in the assertion job category 1. So I'll create 2 records this time, 2 different job categories, another job category. So for the assertion, I want to say this assert JSON. So what JSON structure am I expecting for the response? Am I missing something? Actually, response assert JSON, not this. Okay, so I'm expecting status to be true. Message, anything here, let's say okay. And for the data, I'm expecting an array of the job categories. So I have 2 job categories in the database. I'm expecting an array of those job categories. The first item there, let's say ID, to be job category 1 ID. And then the title and user ID. Let me just use title. and user ID, user underscore ID, user ID. I will repeat the same for the second job category. So 2, 2, and 2. Okay, so now we go ahead and run the test. Artisan test. So we get an error. It says the get method is not supported. Basically, this is saying that we don't have such route. Of course, we don't have that. So let's go to api.php route file and define the route. Get job categories. The method to call is index. So we have defined the route and specified the method to call and run the test again. This time it says the method index does not exist. Of course, we don't have a method called index in the job category controller. So let's go ahead and create that method. This is going to be a very simple one. So our public function index, and the only thing I want to do here is to return response JSON, and the JSON is going to be status true, come on, true, and message, okay, and then data to be job category all. Okay, I think that is it. Now let's go ahead and run the test one more time. Test. Okay, we have, what is the problem now? Let me just scroll up quickly. We have title, user ID, title, user ID, title, user ID, and for the message, okay, the difference here, one has full stop, the other doesn't have full stop. So I will go to, let me just add the full stop here, clear this, run the test again. So the full stop doesn't really matter to me. Okay, so the job category test all passed. I think at this time let's just quickly move over to the job test. I mean, there are other test methods you might want to add here, but this is just enough to get the general idea of what we are trying to achieve. All right, now let's focus on the job itself. So some of the things, or most of the things we are going to do here will be similar to what we have done so far under job categories. To get started, now we don't have job test class. I'll go ahead to create that class, PHP artisan make test job test. This is going to create inside the test. So we have this job test class. I will actually go ahead and remove this. The first thing I want to do here is to test for creating a job. Create job. process job created. Okay, and the endpoint is going to be API/job. This will be a post request that will have some headers and payload. So, and we make some assertions afterwards. If I go ahead and run this, oh come on, not test, PHP artisan test. So if we run that, we can see that we are getting a 404 because we don't even have this endpoint defined. Head over to the API.route, API routes file, and let's define that. We call it jobs. This is going to be a post request, and we are going to use job controller. The method is going to be store. Of course, we don't already have this job controller class, so let's go ahead and clear that. PHP artisan make controller job controller. Okay, with job controller created, let's make sure we import it in the route file job controller. Now that is done, we run the test again, artisan test. So this time we get 500 server error. Remember we say sometimes when the error message is not clear, you might just call this method this without exception handling and run the test again. Let's see what the problem is. So it's saying that the store method does not exist. Of course, we don't have a method called store, so let's go ahead and create that. Public function store request. Now if I run the test, because the method now exists, everything passes, right? Because by default the controller method will return status code of 200. That's why this assertion passes. Okay, let's make further assertions, because for when we create a job, we're expecting that the API, that the endpoint will return the job we just created. So let's go ahead and make that assertion. Response assert JSON. What are we expecting? Status to be true. Message, come on, message to be job created, and the data, this will give us the job that was just created. So data we have, actually let's go up here and define and have some variables up here. So job title, let's say software engineer, and the job title. What are those fields we have for job? So for job we have the ID, title, description, location, requirements, user ID, and job category ID. So let me quickly have those things here. Description. To save us some time, I had to pause the video and add these variables. these fields. So what we have a title, description, location, requirement, and then I created a job category. Then we have the header, and then this inside the payload. Job category ID is this job category, the ID. Okay, we pass that to this call. The first has to be the payload, the second is the header according to the method definition. Now we make some assertion. I'll actually try to be a little quick here because we have already done something similar to what we are doing here now. The assertion is going to be ID to be moment. ID should be 1 because that should be the only record that we have in the database, and title should be the same thing as the title up there. Similar thing for, actually I'll take all this, put them here, because I expect that the response I will get, the data is going to match what we have when we created the job. Okay, I think it's fine now. Let's go ahead and run the test. So PHP artisan test. Okay, with there's no such table. Yeah, we don't have the table for. Let's make the model and the migration file for job. PHP artisan make model job. So this will create the job model class and the migration file at the same time. With that done, if we go ahead and run the test again, this is taking some time. Why is it taking so much time? Oh, come on. Okay, why that is going on, we already know what we are going to get here. Let me open the migration file first. Migrations. So inside the migrations file, I want to add those columns, because even if we go ahead to pretend that we don't know what the test will be, if we don't have those columns, we're just going to be wasting our time. So there's going to be title, and there will be this string. This should be text, description. Should I make this nullable? No. And there will be location, string location, and we have requirements, text. This one can be null, and we're going to have user ID and job category ID. So user ID will be similar to what we have for job categories. Copy that, go over here, put that. I'll paste it twice because I want to have job category ID as well. So change this to job category ID. Okay, I think that covers all the fields we want to have in the jobs table. I'll now go go back to, let me just run the test now. Run the test. So no such table insert into users. Why is that so? Let's add the thread use refresh database. Come on, use refresh database, and we run the test again. So this time we get invalid JSON was returned. Okay, for the method, the store method, we did not return any JSON at all. So let's return. Okay, response JSON. For now, let's have an empty JSON, and one more time. Okay, this time it says we are expecting this, but we got an empty response. Of course, because that's what we are returning. Let's do something else. What we are going to do here is to validate the incoming request, and I also want to get the data. So we're expecting the title to be required string max 255. Once again, to save some time, I've added these validation rules here. So this is for the title, description, location, requirement, job category, ID. It must be for a job category that exists, and it has to be an integer. With that, we try to create a job. Say job to be job model. Make sure that is imported. Create and pass the data. So you make sure you import the job model up there. Okay, let's now modify this set status to be true and message to be job created, and the data to be the job we just inserted into the database. Okay, let's give that a try. PHP artisan test. Okay, so we are trying to insert this record mass assignable, but we did not define them. We did not add them to fillable in the model. Say protected fillable title description location requirements job job category ID. I think those are the items we need here. With those added to the fillable array, let's run the test again. Okay, user ID. So that is the error we are getting here. The table needs user ID. We go here. There are different ways I can do this. This is okay. Let me take the easier way. So I can then say job user underscore ID to be ID of the authenticated user, ID, and then now I have to call job save, because what we have up here is an instance of the job model. Job save. Okay, let's test one more time. So this is failing again because here there's no user ID. That is why we are having this not constraint something user ID, right? So remember how we did it for job category test. We use Sanctum acting as user factory create. So this will give us an authenticated user that we are trying to make use of here. All right, with that, let's try one more time. Okay, so we didn't get that same error. This time a different error. I can quickly spot that there's a full stop here, there's no full stop here. I guess let me just quickly modify one of these, put period there. Okay, now our test passes. Cool. One thing here is that when we create a new resource, we expect a status code of 201 and not 200. So actually we need to run the test for creating job again. We are expecting a 201 now, but we are getting a 200. So what we can do is to come here and pass the correct status code. That will be 201, and our test should pass. Oh, come on, SQL Pro. Run this. The test passes once again. Before we wrap things up, let me quickly add one more test method. Remember, like I said earlier, you could have so many test records here, but we are not going to cover all the possible cases in this lesson. So this is going to be for update job updated. So what I did was to copy the test method for creating job, paste it down here, rename the method. I just want to make some changes here. Maybe I want to change the job title to software developer, description to looking for software developer. I can remove the other things here. I don't need those, and I will create a job create. Okay, the header will remain the same, the payload going to be those two there. Now the endpoint, we are going to call an endpoint that has the job ID. This will have the job ID. So for example, come on, we have job IOB job. So assuming the ID is 3, supposed to be /3, but we are not hard coding the ID there, so we have slash this job ID, payload, headers. So I'll just quickly go ahead to make assertion without taking so much time, right? Let me copy this job location requirement category ID. So we're expecting that the title will be the new title, the description will be the new description, other things will remain the way they were when the job was created. There's no need moving this up here, but just put it up there. Now we make a call to that endpoint. Let's run the test. Clear this. Run the test. So it turns out that we don't have job factory. Of course, let's create one. PHP artisan make factory, job factory. Now we have it. We clear this. We run the test. This time we get insert into job. So actually we don't have, I'm sorry, we have job table, of course. Okay, so the thing is we are using the wrong method here. This should be patch. I wanted to use patch here, not post. So run this test again. It's going to say, why am I getting the same thing? So this error occurred at job test line 68, where we call the method to create job factory. Yeah, so it's because we in the job factory we haven't done anything there, so we are trying to create a job without those fields that are required. Head over to job factory. Let's add those fields. We have title. Actually, I'll pause this video, add the whole stuff and explain. So I've added the fields here. Title will be words, 2 words as text. Paragraph will be 2 paragraphs, and city, it should be city. Just using faker to generate some dummy data here. Requirements, paragraph, job category ID. This will give us the job category ID. This will give us user ID. Okay, we have all the fields we need there. We run the test one more time. It says no column, named paragraph. Insert. Where do we have? Oh, come on. Description. Description. This time, no location. What is going on? It's location, not city. So let's run this test again. What is happening is that we don't have this route, this endpoint defined. So let's head over to api.php route spy. Our route is going to be patch job / ID of the job we want to update, and the method name will be update. So test, it says the method update does not exist, of course. So let's create a method update. Public update. This is going to take request, and in addition to that is the ID of the job you want to update. So the first thing I want to do here is to try to get the job find ID. And one more thing, because the user should update a job that is created by that user, so I'm going to do something else here. Job where user ID is the ID of the authenticated user ID, and the job ID itself now is this ID. Say first. Okay, so this will give us the job created by this user, the authenticated user, with this ID. If not job, if the job is not found, we can return at this point, return response JSON so what we want to return is status to be false because there's no such job, and a message we can say we did not post any job like that, and data will be null. Keep doing the same thing. So at this point the job is found. So what I want to do is to get the data validate and get the data. This will be similar to what we have up here, so I'll just copy all this. What we have for create, put it here. In addition to that, okay, there's nothing description, there's nothing unique here, so I think we are good to update the job update data, and we return, and we actually copy this, we return the job. This time we leave it at the default 200, not 201. Job updated. Okay, I think everything is looking the way it should be. First we find the job. If it doesn't exist, we return here. From this point downwards, we are sure that the job exists, and we go ahead to update the job. Okay, and we return this response. Let's run the test one more time. ID of non-object in job category, in job test, we're trying to get ID. Okay, so this should be job category ID. Unfortunately, we did not create job category factory create. All right, we run this test again. This time we're expecting status okay, so the thing is that we're expecting this, but we got this. says no such job posted by you. The reason for this is because let's pass user ID here. I will take this user out. User, we'll say user to be equal to that. Pass that user here. Here we set user ID, user underscore ID to be user ID. So now we are sure that this user is the one that created the job, hence we can update it. We can update the job. Run this test one more time. It says the given data was invalid. What we are going to do is to comment this out. Remember that sometimes this can be helpful, sometimes it just doesn't help you at all. We run the test again and we get a message. So the message is that these fields are required. Actually, the problem comes from here. We are using the same validation we used for creating a job, but this is supposed to be different because we can decide to update a field or not. So make those nullable. We run this test one more time, and this time, so here we have job category ID 2, but the actual one is job category ID 1. The reason for that is that the factory for job already handles the case of job category ID. If we want to override that, we can actually do so. We can override job category ID like this. So that is one. Secondly, down here we are saying created, it should be job updated. So I guess those are the two things we have here and here. I'll clear this one more time, run the test. Expecting 201. Come on, it should be 200. We are expecting 200, not 201. And finally, our test passed. Okay guys, I believe that so far we have covered at least enough to get you started writing automated tests for your Laravel project. If you believe this is helpful in any way or someone out there is going to find it helpful, please promote support by clicking the like button there and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so. So this is where we end this lesson. Of course, there is a whole lot of things you might still want to cover here. Alright, the idea is to give a general overview, the flow, the setup, and all those kind of stuff, and a couple of test methods that will show you how you might want to do it when working on a project. Okay, I believe that you enjoyed this lesson. See you next time. Bye.